be willing to look foolish by not being good, because in the beginning you're not going to be good, and that's okay. Nobody's good from the beginning.
Hasan Kubba. He's the author of the book, The Unfair Advantage. He's a life coach and an entrepreneur based in UK who has shared his knowledge on multiple platforms such as TedX and other podcasts. He's one of the most smartest people that I've had the privilege of talking to in this podcast.
And be patient. One thing I wasn't when I was young is patient. You have to be patient with steady, slow improvement.
We talked about his book, how to be consistent in life, and other habits that a teenager can use to be successful in their life.
So I'm a big believer in being a transformational creator and helping people to level up.
This is the Grow Podcast, hosted by yours truly, Ruman, and I hope you all enjoy the conversation ahead. Hi Hassan, it's an honor to have you on this podcast. I've gone through all of your works, and you are your book won the award for the best business book in UK, and I think it deserves much more than that. Learning to work on your strengths, that's such an important thing that most of us don't realize. And teenagers, like someone like me, a 16-year-old person, if we learn these skills at such an early age, I think it would be it would put us in such a huge advantage. So thank you for agreeing to come on this podcast. It's an honor.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate being invited on and your kind words.
All right. So the first question that I'd like to ask you is that, as you mentioned in your book, The Unfair Advantage, that life is fundamentally unfair. How can a teenager identify their own unfair advantages?
I think as a teenager, it's just very important to try lots of things and to stay open-minded, because you probably don't yet know very well what you're good at. I certainly didn't. So your internal strengths and even your circumstances, they might change a bit. So what I would do, and this is the advice I'd give to my younger self as well, is just to try things, try different jobs. You learn so much doing jobs, even something as small or seemingly silly like telesales or retail jobs or something like that. I started to do with telesales jobs. You learn so much. So try lots of different things, do lots of different projects, and try and explore your curiosity. And especially publishing stuff, I think is great to be a creator and doing what you're doing right now.
That's really great to know. And in your podcast with Ali Abdaal, you said that your unfair advantage is communication. You figured that out at a relatively early age. So how can someone such as me work on these unfair advantages to sort of make them your unique selling point as a person?
Yeah, so I actually didn't figure it out when I was young. Like, I kind of had an inkling, but I never thought I could have a career in that space. I thought, I'm good at science or medicine, or I just didn't know much about careers. And I think careers departments at college and university were just kind of useless. Didn't really help me. I think the best way is to actually do some work shadowing, do some internships, stuff like that to learn it. So I didn't actually recognize it that early on. But it seems obvious in retrospect when I look back. But like at the time, I didn't realize that was my strength at all. Actually, English was my weakest subject. I think that if that's your unique, if that's your unfair advantage is communication, I think what you should do is to help communicate to people. So I run a course called Transformational Creator, and I coach a lot of creators, including Ali Abdaal, but a lot of other big kind of TikTokers and YouTubers with like millions of subscribers and stuff. And what I tell them, or what I tell people starting out, not really the big ones. The big ones all know that, but sometimes they need reminders. But what I say is, it's important to use your communication skills to help people to level up. That's one of the greatest ways you can use it. So communication is all about persuasion, and it's all about simplifying things. So if you're a good communicator, it's good for you to simplify things that you've learned and help people out in their own lives. And I think it's very important to think about people who are like you, or maybe you 6 months, if you're a teenager, like you 6 months ago, or you a year ago, and what advice you'd give to that person, and create content like that, or even create content for your friends and to help them to level up in their lives. So I'm a big believer in being a transformational creator and helping people to level up and become like better versions of themselves. I think that's a very important part of it. And I think if you're good at that side, you might also potentially be good at coaching as well. So that's also an area to look into, is being, because there's an overlap between being a teacher and being a coach. And I think that there's a really good overlap. And even as a teacher, you can learn more coaching skills and get to know what problems people have and help solve them for people. And that way you can come up with business ideas, and you can also come up with like content ideas. So whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's like a podcast or a newsletter or a book that you write, you can use that skill. In terms of jobs, you can do things like sales, you can do things like marketing, you can do things like public speaking. These are all areas that can really help.
Perfect. Okay. Do you think that communication and speaking skills are essential in today's day and age? And if yes, how can someone learn to speak eloquently?
To an extent, I don't think it's essential to be amazing, but if it's a really big weakness, it can be one of those things that hold you back, even if you have a career that's got absolutely nothing to do with communication. Like, let's say you're an engineer, but see, even as an engineer, you need to be able to communicate well enough. So if it's so bad that you need to bring it up to a level where it's good enough, but you don't need to be really eloquent or excellent from there.
Okay, that's great to know. Could you please explain what's the miles framework which has been mentioned in your book, and how can a teenager set themselves up for success by optimizing on this framework?
So the Miles framework is a tool to audit and to discover your unfair advantages. So M stands for money, which is the typical excuse people have when they say I'm not successful because, or I don't have a business because I'm not rich already. And then you have intelligence and insight. That's I. And there's 3 different types of intelligence, which we get into in the book. There's book smarts, but that's the typical kind of one that people consider when they talk about being smart. But there's also street smarts, which is like emotional intelligence as well, and social intelligence. And that one, if you don't get the best grades at school, it's not necessarily going to make a huge difference as long as you make up for it with emotional and social intelligence. And actually, in a way, that's kind of more important in business. Both are important, but I think in a way it's more important to have the social and emotional intelligence. And then you have creative intelligence is the 3rd type, which is actually very important and underrated. And then you have insight. Insight is when you can see what problems there are to solve in the world. And that's why I say try lots of different industries and different jobs, because then you can find out the different problems that there are and get some insights, the unfair advantage of insight. So that one's key for coming up with business ideas and things like that. And then you have L. L is location and luck, which is right place, right time. And then you have education and expertise. And by the way, in terms of luck, we go into in the book how to increase your luck. And then you have E, which is for education and expertise. And this is the one that you probably have the most leverage on as a teenager. You can build your expertise by learning, taking courses online, getting coaching, let's say, or just by doing things, just learning and doing. You can even just watch things for free on YouTube and just do it. And so one thing that you did at the beginning of this, before we started recording, is you asked me if there's anything I need help with, which is amazing, because that's how you can learn, by working on real life projects like that. And so that's expertise. And obviously education, even the formal education, can be very useful depending on what you want to do with it, and we break that down in the book. And then you have status, which is huge. It's how you're perceived. Now this one you have less influence on directly. It's something to be aware of, but the thing that you do have influence on and you can start to build is your internal or inner status, which is kind of your confidence and self-esteem. So those are the different things on the Miles framework. And as a teenager, as I said, the most important thing to work on is trying lots of different jobs, working on lots of different projects, having fun with creating rather than consuming. One thing I did too much of when I was a teenager is consuming. And we all do consumption. We all watch TV shows and movies and, I don't know, like other type, eat food. But the more that you can kind of create rather than consume, the better off you'll be.
All right, that's very great. How do you increase your luck? As you mentioned, that's something that can be done.
So increasing your luck is all about having the right mindset. Professor Richard Wiseman, he did an experiment and he saw that people who are positive and consider themselves lucky. So even if you don't think you're lucky, if you consider yourself lucky, you'll probably start to see more opportunities and reasons that you are lucky. A lot of this was also about gratitude and feeling grateful for what you've got rather than what you don't have. That's a huge theme in the book. And finally, the most important one in a way is you increase your luck by trying more things. So it's like increasing your surface area for luck, which is like, imagine it's rolling some dice, a pair of dice, and trying to hit a double six, imagine if nobody checked how many times you tried. Nobody cares how many times you fail and roll a 1-1 or any other number. At the end of the day, it's all about rolling. You just need to roll a 12 once, or even an 11. You could probably still do well, if I'm going to use the analogy, structure, the metaphor. In other words, just keep rolling the dice, and one day you'll hit the jackpot. I don't mean that in terms of silly and stupid things like gambling or betting. I would not recommend that one bit. I mean, in real life, trying things. So, for example, publishing content or trying business or trying a service or whatever, doing some freelance work, you might just get lucky, right? So you just have to try lots of things. And
Putting yourself out there, right?
exactly.
Okay, let's say a person tries 12 different things and they find that one thing that they're excellent at. How can they stand out from the rest and be the best in what they do or in the industry?
What was the question? How can they be the best in what?
In their chosen field of interest?
Yeah. I mean, you have to follow a path of mastery. You can't, you actually have to care, how to be good at anything. First of all, you have to care and be interested in being good and be passionate about it and actually be driven to create great results. Secondly, you have to get feedback, which is hard. It's actually not easy to ask for feedback. But if you can ask for feedback, then you can learn. As painful as it might be to get some criticism sometimes, hopefully it's constructive criticism. But another form of feedback is when you publish something. Like sometimes you might come up, let's say you come up with a TikTok video and you're like, okay, this is a great idea. Let me do this. I think it might go viral. And you work so hard on it and you edit it and you put the right music and you post it. This has happened to me, right? You post it and it's like, you just get like, I don't know, 100 views and no one cares. And you're like, that's feedback. It can be painful because especially when your expectations are high, you're like, oh damn, I thought it's going to do well.
Yeah,
But that's how you get good. You just have to keep putting yourself out there. It's a little bit like getting better at sports or getting better at learning a language. You have to be willing to look foolish. Be willing to look foolish by not being good, because in the beginning you're not going to be good, and that's okay. Nobody's good from the beginning, so you have to just push through that initial pain. That first, let's say the first YouTube video, it's painful. I'm struggling to get past that phase. I mean, I've done my first, but to actually have an edited video, I struggled with that habit last year, and that's something I'm working on. But I started to do more TikToks. And it's like that feeling of being outside of your comfort zone and pushing and getting the feedback, and then looking and thinking about how you can get better. And that is the way to go on the path of mastery for any skills. I think it's crucial.
How do you deal with hate that with the content that you put out, the talks that you've given on TEDx, with the book,
Yeah,
with your YouTube channel?
you have to
How do you deal
expect a
with
bit
that?
of hate. A bit. Not like a ton or overwhelming. You have to expect a bit of hate, because if what you're saying is so bland that nobody, like, if you're too worried about ruffling some feathers, now there's a level where it's too far. But if you're saying things which are fundamentally good, there's nothing fundamentally unethical or immoral, then you should feel, you're not trying to hurt somebody, then you should feel free to say it. And reality is you're probably going to get less hate than you think, and most people actually don't care about you. So one thing to focus on in terms of getting better at anything or becoming the best is, first you have to focus on quantity, then focus on quality. Because first you have to just establish the habit. This is classic from Atomic Habits. First you establish the habit just by showing up, and then you get better at it. So it's very important to do that, and you kind of get slowly better from there and build on the quality, and don't let your perfectionism hold you back. And part of the perfectionism, kind of, I guess, is to worry about hate, or just It's part of a narcissism and a self-centeredness to think that everybody cares about what you're doing. Nobody really cares that much. So just do it. No one really cares. Don't worry about the hate. And
Yeah.
if you do get a little bit, that's okay. Just be okay with it. You have to have a bit of resilience. That's why it's good to get some sales jobs when you're young. You can learn to get rejection and just putting yourself out there. Yeah.
I mean, that would help so many of us with dealing with hate, because we don't focus on the 99% of the comments that are positive. We focus on the ones that are
Yeah.
negative when they're criticizing, your way of speaking or whatever content that you're putting out. It's That does make a lot of sense. And since you've coached so many successful people, what is that one thing that most people have had to work on or had to improve on?
I think very successful people, you'll be surprised to hear that they suffer from the same insecurities, the same procrastination, the same fears as the rest of us. They're nothing, they're not alien, they're not so different. But one thing that they're really good at is speed of implementation. You tell them something, and this is something to work on. This is the biggest piece of advice I'll give to you as a teenager, and something which I wasn't very good at and which I've started to build and become better at, is speed of implementation. So when you learn something new, how quickly do you implement it? Do you overthink it and overanalyze it and let it sit in your subconscious for days and weeks and months before you actually apply it? Or do you just apply it and then worry about it later? And I think the people who are successful just do it. Just implement fast. And I think it's the key factor to success is how fast you implement new advice or new learnings or teachings that you take on.
That makes sense, but if the work that you're doing, if the skill that you're implementing, that isn't, I mean, obviously it's not going to be that great at the starting,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you're competing with people who are much better at what you do.
Yeah.
So how do you beat that in a sense, or how do you like allow yourself to make those mistakes uh, in a
So this,
sense?
I got this quote from Ali, who got this quote from a book or something. I think it's from Dan Sullivan. He's a strategic coach, and he says, "Measure the gain, not the gap." So don't measure the gap that's between your quality and your favorite creator's quality of work. Measure how much you're improving. In other words, stop comparing yourself. Understand that everybody was a beginner at some point. Go look at MKBHD's first video upload if you've ever seen that. And just understand that everybody starts off somewhere. And you just have to give it a shot, and you have to be okay with putting out some crappy stuff in the beginning, but then improve it. So first establish the habit, then improve it. And don't even need to look for feedback in the early stages, because you know it's what needs to be improved. So this is the key thing for when somebody's a complete and utter beginner or still in the very, very early stages. Like, feedback isn't even kind of is useful, but kind of isn't, because actually they probably know what they're doing wrong. But they don't even especially if you're the type of personality who researches things and it researches how to get better at something, or how to make a good, let's say, using the YouTube videos as an example, how to make a good YouTube video, you probably research it and you probably know what a good video looks like. So you probably already know where you're not doing well. So just get the quantity out there and improve each one bit by bit, and be patient. One thing I wasn't when I was young is patient. You have to be patient with steady, slow improvement, rather than thinking you need to improve your life all at once, everything in one go. So it's very key.
That makes sense. um all right, stemming away from that, I had this question, like, that I personally want to know. As you said, patience, right? That ties a lot with perseverance, doing the work that you're doing every day. It doesn't matter if you feel good or not, but that becomes very difficult at times when you are feeling low, or you have an exam coming up and you have 10 other things, but you don't want to get out of your bed to do all that. So how does a person become consistent, and obviously then only then patience comes into play, right?
So you're asking me, how do you become consistent?
Yeah.
By setting the bar low. So by saying, for example, I'm right now trying to build a habit of writing every day. because I'm an entrepreneur. I have a background as being a writer. I wasn't a writer before. English was my weakest subject. I wasn't a blogger or anything like that before. I just wrote this book. It's done really well. Okay. So now I'm like trying to build a habit. And first I said I'll do an hour a day, and I failed because I kept having meetings and moving it around, or I wake up late or something. Okay. Then I said half an hour. I did it once, and then I haven't done it since then, but slowly I'm going to build that more. So I don't have enough accountability in place for me. So now I'm telling myself I'm just going to do 5 minutes. Establish the habit before you improve it. So lower the bar. To make yourself consistent, lower the bar. So one thing, if you're struggling with doing YouTube videos, or especially with for me, I'm not good, maybe you're better at this, but for me, the post-production and editing, and that's the bit which I can't be bothered for. Talking on camera, I'm okay. Relatively okay. Especially if it's off the cuff. If it's structured, then I struggle again because I'm like, what comes next? And I have to check the script and I get frustrated. But just talking. So then, okay, let's just put videos out there. So I did like 6 weeks in a row, one video a week, which was quite good at one stage last year. And that's because I was just filming it and just uploading it just from my phone and just did it. So lower the bar, whatever can make it less friction for you. One thing that has worked for me this year is to do TikToks instead. For some reason, doing it vertically and then TikTok's editing tools and stuff makes it quite easy. Just do that. Establish the habit before you try to improve it. So if you're struggling with consistency, number one, understand your why. Why do you want to do this? Remind yourself the reason why you want to do it. Secondly, lower the bar. If you think it's so pointless to do like 1 press up or 2 press ups or whatever you want to start with, well, at least it's establishing a habit. Then you can build up to 3, 4, 10, 20, whatever. Like you can build up. So I actually do that now with pull-ups and press-ups. I just do like 5. Like I did 5 pull-ups earlier, and they're not even full range of motion, because I used to be a perfectionist. I'd be like, I have to do it like this and then pull down all the way down, and otherwise it doesn't count. And that's just silly, because bit by bit you can get stronger and stronger. So that are just partial reps. They're just like from here to like here. It's just like, because the bar is not that high. I'm quite tall.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm getting stronger. It's actually improving me. But because I had a stupid perfectionist mindset of no, it has to be a proper rep, so I didn't do it in the end. So I think consistency is a lot about lowering the bar. And I do recommend, and even in our book, I recommend the book Atomic Habits for that. But it's also important to understand, this is what we talk about in the Unfair Advantage book. It's what is your why? What's your vision? Understand your personality type a little bit, get some feedback from friends, family, and then understand your unfair advantages. And it takes time. Understand that that's a process, that it takes time to figure out your unfair advantages. So I think that's how we would do it.
Wow, that's really great to know. What's your why as a person?
My why right now, so you reach a point in life where you're like sorted, and hopefully you can reach that point in your life where you're financially fine. It's not super wealthy. It's not like crazy, like, I'm a billionaire now. No, nothing like that. Just like, I'm fine. So now what? Now what am I doing this for? And I think it's key to actually have some kind of vision around that. And for me, it's like to use this gift, this God's gift that I seem to have. I got the feedback. The book has done really well. First time authors. Okay, there's something there. Okay, so communication, explaining stuff. I need to do it. And I need to have that impact, and I want to help other people who want to start their first business or want to become creators or want to have success in their lives in some way. So for me now, it's for the fun of it, and it's for the impact that it will have. So I want to help people level up in their lives, and that's my big why.
It's, how can a teenager find their why? And is it necessary for a teenager to find their why?
Yeah, because we all have goals for everything. So it's good to be aware of what your goal is. Saying your why is the same as saying what is your goal. So whether you know it or not, you have goals. Whether you've written them down or thought about it, or whether they're just subconsciously there is going to be a goal there. So you just have to accept the fact that there is a goal, there is a why, or you just have to be clear on it. So it's very important, and it's part of the self-awareness journey.
Okay. Thank you for answering all these questions. I think it will help all of us a lot, and I'm truly, truly grateful for you for agreeing to give your time. Thank you so much, and I'm very glad to have talked to you. I'm hoping to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Roman, and we're very happy to stay in touch. And thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the end of the episode. Hope you all enjoy the ideas that we discussed in this podcast. In case if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. And until then, feel free to check out our other episodes.